You're 19, standing in a line that hasn't moved in 11 minutes, holding a folder of papers your mother helped you put together the night before, and the man behind the counter barely looks up when it's finally your turn. He asks for your ID, types for a while, slides a form across for you to sign, and somewhere in the middle of explaining the minimum balance requirement, his eyes drift to the line behind you, the way someone checks a clock they're not supposed to be checking. You open the account with $340, everything you have, and you leave 20 minutes later without him ever once saying your name. His name tag says Theo. You won't think about him again for almost 3 years. You have no idea, standing at that counter, how many more times your paths are going to cross, or what he's going to remember about this exact afternoon, decades from now, in a room you can't yet imagine walking into. For most of your 20s, this bank is just a building you visit when something's wrong. A card declined that shouldn't have been. A fee you don't understand. You call the number on the back of your card and speak to whoever answers, a different voice every time, reciting your account number like a password to a room nobody's particularly excited to let you into. Nothing about these interactions is rude, exactly. It's just frictionless in a way that has nothing to do with warmth. You are, as far as the system is concerned, a set of digits attached to a balance that rarely goes above 4 figures, and the system treats you accordingly, which is to say, barely at all. Something shifts quietly, around 28. You've been saving with more discipline than usual for about 2 years, a modest but real cushion building behind your checking account, when your phone rings one Tuesday afternoon with the bank's number on the screen. Not a recording. An actual person, introducing herself by name, asking if you have 5 minutes to talk about your accounts. Nobody has ever called you first. You've called them plenty of times, waited on hold, explained yourself to strangers, but this is the first time the bank has reached toward you instead of the other way around, and it feels, oddly, like being noticed after years of walking past the window nobody looked up from. She mentions, near the end of the call, that based on your balance, you might qualify for a slightly better savings rate, a small perk you didn't know existed because nobody had ever mentioned it to you before. It isn't a large amount of money. What stays with you isn't the rate. It's the fact that the offer existed the entire time, sitting there, available, just never extended to you until your number crossed some threshold you didn't know you were approaching. At 34, you sell the small business you've spent 6 years building, and the number that lands in your account changes the shape of every conversation you have with this bank going forward. Within a week of the deposit clearing, you get a call, this time from someone with the word advisor in her title, inviting you to come in and talk about your options rather than simply manage your checking account. You walk into the branch expecting the same 11-minute line from 15 years earlier. Instead, someone at the door asks if you're here to see Priya, and within 90 seconds you're sitting in a small office with the door that closes, being offered coffee by someone whose entire job, apparently, is to know your financial life well enough to anticipate what you might need before you ask for it. This is the level where the discomfort first sets in, quiet and specific. You catch yourself, sitting in that office, feeling like you're not quite dressed for the room, like some part of you is bracing to be told there's been a mistake, that this warmth was meant for someone else. Nobody says anything of the sort. Priya is entirely genuine, entirely competent, entirely kind. What unsettles you isn't her. It's the math you can't stop doing in the back of your mind, the quiet, uncomfortable understanding that this exact quality of attention was always possible, always sitting somewhere in this building's capacity to offer it, and it simply hadn't been offered to the version of you that had $340 and no advisor at all. By 41, your assets crossed 7 figures spread across investments Priya helped you build over the better part of a decade, and the bank moves you again, this time into something with the word private attached to it. A different building, a few blocks from the branch you've used your whole life, glass doors that don't have handles you need to pull, because someone on the other side sees you coming and opens them before you reach for anything. You're assigned a team now instead of a single advisor, someone for investments, someone for estate planning, someone whose entire function seems to be making sure nothing about your financial life ever again requires you to wait in a line. It's in this building, at 46, that you see Theo again, for the first time in over 20 years. He doesn't recognize you immediately, and you almost don't recognize him either, older now, wearing a title on his badge that has nothing to do with the counter you first met him across. It's a brief encounter, a hallway introduction during a meeting about something else entirely, and neither of you mentions the first account, mostly because either of you is entirely sure, in that moment, that you're remembering the same afternoon. The real conversation happens 2 years later, at 48, when your net worth crosses $10 million and you're invited, for the first time, into a room on the top floor that you didn't know existed until the letter arrived. It has a name that sounds almost embarrassed to say out loud, something about Legacy Services. And when you walk in, Theo is sitting at the far end of the table, senior enough now that this room is apparently his to run. He remembers the account this time, immediately, before you say anything about it yourself. He tells you, almost apologetically, that he's thought about that day more than you'd expect a bank teller to think about any single customer, because it was one of his first weeks on the job, and his manager had specifically instructed the new tellers to move quickly through small accounts, to keep the line short for what the branch, at the time, quietly referred to as priority customers, waiting behind you. He says he remembers feeling strange about it even then, 19 years old himself, barely older than you were, doing exactly what he'd been trained to do and feeling uncomfortable about it the entire time. This is the part that reorganizes everything you thought you understood about the last 3 decades. The warmth you've been gradually receiving at every wealth level wasn't rationed by the bank's actual capacity to offer it. It was rationed by a decision, somewhere above Theo's head, about which customers were worth the time it takes to actually see someone. He had it in him to treat you well from the very first day. The system simply hadn't authorized it yet. You sit with that for a long moment, in a room with a view that costs more than your first apartment did, and you think about every person still standing in that 11-minute line downstairs right now, holding folders their parents helped them put together, being processed instead of seen, not because the people behind the counter are incapable of warmth, but because nobody's told them yet that this particular customer is worth extending it to. Theo asks, near the end of the meeting, if you remember what you told him that first day, filling out the paperwork. You don't. He does. You'd mentioned, almost as an aside while he processed the form, that you were opening the account because you'd just gotten your first real job and wanted somewhere safe to put money you were actually planning to keep, for once, instead of spending immediately. He says it's the kind of thing he heard from a dozen 19-year-olds a week back then, and mostly forgot within the hour. He remembers yours, he says, because of how carefully you signed your name, like it mattered to you in a way it clearly didn't matter to most of the other kids passing through that line that summer. You leave the building that afternoon, and without entirely planning to, drive past the original branch, still standing on the same corner it's occupied your whole life. Through the window, you can see the line, shorter than it used to be but still there, still moving slowly, still full of people the system hasn't decided yet are worth noticing. You don't go in. You just sit in the car for a minute, thinking about how much has changed about how the world responds to you, and how little has actually changed about who you were the day you signed that first form as carefully as you knew how. Here's what almost nobody explains clearly about how money changes the way you're treated. It was never really about the bank discovering something new about you as your balance grew. The warmth, the attention, the doors that opened themselves, all of it was already there, the entire time, sitting quietly in the capacity of ordinary people working ordinary jobs, waiting for permission to be extended to whoever walked through next. What actually changed, level by level, wasn't you. It was who the world had decided, based on a number, was finally worth the trouble of truly seeing.